on today's show.
You get a call at 5 o'clock from a friend of mine who's in entertainment. He says, "Oh man, you better watch The Daily Show tonight." I'm like, what? Of all the people in the world who's watching this thing, the John Stewart team? And so that's what it does. He says, today at the White House, it was hilarious. And he just endless loop of me laughing. And it was all embarrassing. Like this guy didn't know what he was doing. It's like, Keystone Cops at the White House. But he ends with, "What's so funny, Indian George Clooney?" And so you're like, okay, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I thought I was in the senior staff.
Did your wife dig that though? I mean, that's kind of...
They were all mortified. My family's mortified that I fumbled my national debut and embarrassed the president, frankly. And so I was in a senior staff meeting. Every morning at 8:30, the senior staff, about 25 people gather in the Roosevelt Room, and they debate the degree to which, issues of the day matter and make sure everyone's on the same page. So I walk in scared to death, and they're going to say, "How dare you embarrass this administration? You screwed this thing up." And I remember vividly, Rahm Emanuel, who's quite,
he's not
to the point. Yeah. He's not, Anyway, he just sort of says, "Indian George Clooney," and so I start laughing. Everyone's laughing, and it was great.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Welcome to the Creator Institute podcast. Your host, Koester.
Welcome everyone to today's show. You guys are going to get to meet a friend of mine, someone I've had the privilege to get to know for the past couple years, Aneesh Chopra. And Aneesh is incredibly understated. He's an entrepreneur working on a very cool problem, trying to kind of solve some of the issues in healthcare. But his beginnings are pretty amazing. Aneesh was the first CTO of the entire United States of America under Barack Obama and had some incredible adventures and stories. We'll hear about some of the adventures, including how he got named by John Stewart, the Indian George Clooney, which is a hilarious story. I love it. You'll hear how Dwayne Wade sent a message through him to get to play basketball with Obama, some crazy things. But what I love about Aneesh's story is that he details how he wrote a book, and that book actually helped him form the entire plan for what is now his startup. He really did follow this process of going deep on a problem through a book and using that to become what ultimately is today his startup that is now serving millions of patients and all sorts of really interesting things. Aneesh is fun. He's really understated, and he is handsome, hence the Indian George Clooney. But I think you're going to love it. We had a great time chatting about his adventures now and how his life in the White House, his life even as a politician and ultimately as an author, helped color what he gets to do today. Aneesh Chopra, everyone, enjoy the chat.
All right.
Aneesh Chopra, my man.
How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
This is, I'd always love when we get back together because it feels like so many things have happened. Like we're sort of like these, there's all this stuff happening. Yes. Then we get back together and then magic happens and we come back and it's a thing. So
the country's moving forward. That's the other best news. We're making progress. We got deviations on some aspects, but some support for the startup economy is continuing, and it's fun.
Did you ever think you'd be an entrepreneur? Like you sort of came from this big
policy.
Yeah.
You
came from sort of
government.
Well, no, you were in private enterprise.
I was. I spent a decade at the advisory board.
Yeah. And then government, where you were like the man.
I was having a lot of fun. Yeah. No, I always felt that the key to solving problems was to unleash entrepreneurs, and that several will find the magic formula and we can scale what works. And so enough of my commentary about it. I reached a pinnacle where I ran for office under the presumption that I would try to call to action this army of entrepreneurs to solve problems. And when I came in second place in my race, I was committed to bringing my ideas to life, not as the evangelist encouraging the entrepreneur, but to be an exemplar entrepreneur of taking advantage of the opportunities that we see now to build companies on the opportunities that are born out of the opening up of government. So that's where we are.
Do you appreciate the work you did with Startup America, kind of in building these communities and ecosystems more now that you're in the game?
Well, I love it because I took for granted whenever you're sitting in a position, I was President Obama's chief technology officer, and you report directly to the President of the United States, you've got this unbelievable home court advantage.
You sort of understated that. You were like, you're like a big deal.
I don't know. I was
Like
I'm not a big deal, but I had a role that was particularly larger than life.
That's right.
And
The first two, did you get like a special badge or something?
Yeah,
like that when
there's
you
a
were
little
first,
coin I get.
Is that right? Yeah. Did you get a tattoo? You should get like a tattoo or something that says like maybe a neck one, CT, just
badass. Something. I don't know. No, you think Washington, you call a meeting.
Right.
CEOs drop what they're doing and within 24 hours they're in Washington.
Mm-hmm.
That's for the president, not for the CTO, but you get the basic metaphor. And what I realized in the Startup America movement was that we think people are listening to the words coming out of our mouth and that, everybody knows we're launching this initiative.
Right.
Where are all the entrepreneurs? Why are they not participating? And it was so obvious that we needed to get out there and educate people, mostly reach them in their community as opposed to waiting for them to come to Washington. So when Startup America was conceived, there was a call to action by President Obama. The first theory was, let's celebrate entrepreneurs. And that was of any variety, entrepreneurs who were making photo apps or fixing some restaurant need or whatever. And I was playing the role of, I got a specific homework assignment by the president. We need to close the innovation gap in health, energy, education, financial access to the poor. Small things.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, while there's this evangelism going on and we're celebrating people, what if we tapped into the subset of those folks who were looking to solve these problems?
Mm-hmm.
I bet there's a separate and more robust conversation worth having, which is what barriers or opportunities are there for you to bring your new ideas to life in helping the poor rise up and to create an economic opportunity? So that was a two-way dialogue. And what was great in my view is that I understood and felt some degree of humility that there's a lot of improvement that needs to be done. And now that I'm on the other side, I see, why on earth is the government not doing this?
Right.
Who are those people? And how dare they not make this easier? This makes no sense. So I'm seeing things at a much more granular level that had I seen on the front end, I would have been more aware to tackle those issues. Often I sit at this high level, and sometimes it's the day-to-day where there's the need and the friction.
Right.
So
it's exciting. It is, right? And I think even I would say, because we first met in San Francisco very briefly. I remember long, many moons ago. Yes. And it was interesting because I think you were with Eric Ries and we met. And I remember at the time, Eric was this newfangled thing. They don't even really know, why the hell does the government have a CTO? And I think what's amazing is we may think about all these whatever problems, but sort of amazing how much things have advanced in the last, was that less than 10 years?
Yeah, and now there's a conversation. If you're a governor, a mayor, a head of state, and you don't have a CTO-like role, the political debate is why not?
Right.
Where is this person?
Right.
And that's kind of a fascinating thing. We didn't know that we needed it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not so sure it's been fully vetted in terms of exactly what you would do if you had a person in that role.
Right.
I was Virginia's 4th Secretary of Technology.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
3 governors, but 4th secretary, because some were replacing within cycle. The first governor had asked his Secretary of Technology to be a marketing evangelist. Mm-hmm. Go tell Silicon Valley to set up their shop in Northern Virginia because that's where the action is. So, and I'm overstating it, but basically a celebratory technology-based economic development executive.
Right.
Wildly successful. Virginia became a real linchpin for a lot of these tech firms. Second governor, Governor Warner, said, well, I want to flip the switch, mostly focusing in-house. Mm-hmm. We're not using technology to do the day-to-day of government.
Interesting.
We're using outdated computer systems, mainframes. Our security is weak. Our data management is poor. So we've got to do some basic blocking and tackling. So let's upgrade the infrastructure. 10-year, $2 billion partnerships, all managed by the CTO. So the CTO was like a marketing agent on the one hand, and then an operational excellence on the other. And then my role, Governor Kane said, well, all that's well and good, but I was elected to fix transportation, healthcare, education, the environment.
Yeah.
I've got cabinet secretaries who are experts in each of these areas. Aneesh, pair up with them to make sure that they're fully, properly extrapolating the value of technology, data, and innovation to do their job. So don't do their job.
Right.
Partner in the use of technology to advance what they think needs to be done. So he called me sort of the chief collaboration officer in a way, because it was technology in support of a mission as opposed to unto itself. And that was really the strategy President Obama embraced. So while, again, I was CTO, reported to the president like I did the governor, it was really the collaboration aspects of finding Secretary Arne Duncan and then launching the Open Education Data Initiative and Open Health Data Initiative with Secretary Sebelius at the time and her deputy Todd Park, who was my successor. So anyway, we go on and on, but that idea of Inservice too, that says to me, everyone, no matter what their stripe is, has a problem they want solved. And they think they have diagnosed the problem because they're experts in the issue and they think they know how they're going to tackle it. But then they haven't properly vetted all that the new technologies and innovations are available to make them do what they think they were going to do. Otherwise, more complicated, do it more easily and at much lower cost. So that's the vision.
Yeah. What was it like to get that call when you're like, hey, I'd like you to come in? And I mean, it's got to be a moment that you sort of like remember forever, right?
Well, it was an odd bird for me because I was recruited to the transition team by a gentleman named Julius Janikowski. Julius had been the president's law school classmate and buddy, had led the technology strategy for the campaign, and had been rumored to naturally be the candidate for CTO. And really, we agreed to work for him in the context of writing up his job description and telling him what the role could be. So I actually spent my time in the transition looking to be CTO of the Department of Health and Human Services.
Oh, really? Is that right?
For sure. And I think I got the job on day one, but there was a bit of a wrinkle. It was Tom Daschle who was nominated and then had this hiccup on the confirmation process. Now it seems quaint that he barely handled some miscallocation of some forms. He, I don't know. In hindsight, was that a bar, having Tom Daschle in versus out, big challenge. So I was not in any hurry. I was going to wait for the new Secretary of Health to be named. I was in Virginia anyway, doing my job for Governor Kane because we were still, in our cabinet role. And the new secretary came in and we arranged the next steps. I actually was basically told, hey, Aneesh, expect to come in on Friday. We're going to give you a call. We think we're going to move forward. That this is led by the deputy secretary. So I was like, great. At Friday at 4, I'm going to get this call, yay or nay. I feel good about it. I'm super excited. Governor Kane had spoken to Governor Sebelius. I felt like, wow, this is all lined up. At noon, I get a call from the chief of staff to the Office of Science and Technology Policy, which is the office that ultimately held the CTO. And so Jim called and says, Aneesh, it's a noon call. He says, hey, can you come to the White House on Monday? I'm like, oh man, I thought I'm getting the offer on 4. Now you're adding more hoops. Do I have to go? Can't I just accept the job? And he goes, no, I can't tell you, but just come by on Monday.
Just come by.
Monday?
Not everyone gets a call just to come by the White House.
Come by the White House. So mostly chief of staff and stakeholders around the chief of staff was the round of meetings Monday. Tuesday, they say, come back. You're going to be vetted for all the legality stuff. Did you cheat on your wife? Did you beat up babies? Did you so they ask you these terrible questions in vetting. And then Wednesday, they're deliberating on whether they're going to extend me an offer. And then of all people, Senator Mark Warner calls, who's my mentor, and says, look, I just spoke to the president and he was evaluating you and basically said, you're in. And so, you haven't heard it yet, but he's probably filming the YouTube video right now. Anyway, I'll fast forward. But on my 15th anniversary for Johns Hopkins, it was that Saturday. And of course, I found out in between that I got the job. In front of all my peers, the YouTube video by the president comes out and it says, today I'm announcing the new CTO, whatever. And so the president of the university stops our luncheon and it's like, by the way, news just broke, blah, blah, blah. And it was great.
It's awesome.
Anyway, a lot of fun, hilarious, but like 4 months of like back and forth policy discussions to 4 days of intense scrutiny. And boom, on the team. Did you ever get, speaking of on the team, I know that there was like this sort of like ongoing pickup basketball game. Did you ever get invited to play? Is that like, I mean, my claim to fame of just a few is that
you have many claim to fame, by the way.
I wrote a book with my colleague and college roommate Ethan Skolnick, who actually is a sports writer. So Ethan tells me in the course of just our daily catch-ups, he says, hey, I saw Dwayne Wade, D Wade, and he was bumming out because he hadn't been invited by President Obama to play pickup basketball. So
Those Chicago guys too. So I'm a Dwayne Wade at Marquette. So I'm a
There
Marquette
you go.
fan and Chicago guy.
Well, I will say, thanks to Ethan's feedback, I called Reggie Love, who was the president's body man.
Yeah.
And next thing I know, D Wade is playing pickup ball. I think Alonzo Mourning was in that day.
Really?
So it was Alonzo, D Wade, the president,
Wow.
Reggie. I was not invited.
No.
But I facilitated.
You did facilitate.
I facilitated.
You were like the agent in that pit
I'm
point,
like,
right?
D-Wade,
You made
man,
stuff
there's some
happen.
love.
Yeah,
it's great.
he's my favorite player. So I think you did great work there.
Thank you.
I mean,
I bring people together. That's the job.
That's kind of the job, right? You're the collaborator in chief.
That's right.
In some ways.
That's right.
That's pretty amazing. Did you ever think you had to be surprised that kind of there was this sort of the timing of it too, right? Like being the CTO and then kind of the technology world sort of explodes during this time. I mean, while you're CTO or around that time, Facebook goes public.
Yes.
Twitter becomes this thing that becomes mass market. So you're sort of like the forces converge. You're like on the Daily Show and stuff. Like things are happening that like probably, because, I'm sure like technology stuff was sort of like happened, but it didn't happen in like such a public face as during that window.
Well, and I will say the timing was fascinating. When the Arab Spring was underway, Twitter had not yet reached the kind of scale that we had now know it to be.
Mm-hmm.
It was the Secretary of State's team under Alec Ross's leadership and Jared Cohen. Alec, now, by the way, candidate for governor in Maryland.
I just spoke to Alec a couple weeks ago.
Great guy.
Yeah.
Alec and Jared intervene to make sure they don't go down. And they were basically going down for updates or whatever, maintenance, right in the middle of the Arab Spring.
Interesting.
So you have this public policy, technology collaboration going on. And what do you call that?
Right.
Was that a government procurement?
Right.
No, we didn't buy Twitter services. We were encouraging and collaborating.
Mm-hmm.
And so, all the old playbooks of you buy technology or you regulate technology, they didn't really envision this new concept of a collaborative model where you're working on standards, you're working on the use of data, open data, you're working on innovation and platforms for prizes and competitions to democratize problem solvers getting access to the government. So all of that's happening in the first term of the Obama administration, and it's fascinating. And now we're seeing it, like I said, it's now a new arm of government.
Right.
It's a whole method of problem solving that is it's not left versus right. It's really kind of problem solvers versus naysayers.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So I have a funny fact for you. So to prepare for this, I Google the person, right? I always like Google.
Okay.
So I Google you.
Uh-oh.
And I was trying to like find something witty. And so of the first 20 instances, could you want to guess how many times the John Stewart quote about you was in it? So John Stewart famously calls you the Indian George Clooney.
Yeah.
Right. So you want to guess of the 20, how many I found that article referenced you in that way?
One or two, I guess.
Four of the 20.
Wow.
So it's become almost like your tagline that you just made it to own this.
Well, it's a flattering and completely ridiculous. The real story is that I thought I was going to lose my job.
Really?
For sure. The context is the White House communications shop is very managed.
Mm-hmm.
Who speaks on behalf of the president? You have to be super trained and
in particular in that White House too. I mean,
we had a well-run operation.
Things are a little
there was
different.
no going rogue. And so, policy advisors do their job. I write memos, give advice, go to meetings.
I bet you write kick-ass memos.
I wrote, my wife would call me chief memo officer. These
memo
are
writer.
Poetry. But look, here's the bottom line. The president on day one said, I want to have a more open and transparent government.
Mm-hmm.
And he directs the CTO and the director of his management budget office to come up with a plan.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were going to release that plan in December. And so they thought, hey, wouldn't that be fun? Live webcast from the White House. Kind of cool.
Yeah.
So we're giddy about the idea. We've been working on this thing for months. Like we know the content cold. And it's like, cool, we're going to announce this live. And 10 people are going to be watching the webcast, but it'll be fun.
Right.
And so everything's fun up until my colleague and my best friend, my colleague Macon and my best friend Vivek Kundra, who's like a brother to me.
Mm-hmm.
He was CIO. Macon ran digital strategy. the light goes on that says the camera is live. This isn't like a recording where I can hit pause and start over. And apparently I was up first to kind of welcome everybody and make the statement. And oh my goodness, I blanked. And I'm like, oh, it's okay. I'll just hit stop and we'll start all over again. Yeah. And then in my head, I'm thinking, you can't hit stop. You can't hit stop. Yeah. You're live. Yeah. So now all I'm doing is in my head, thinking about the tragedy that is unfolding and before my eyes. I don't know what I'm supposed to say, how I'm saying it. So I just start laughing uncontrollably. And I had no idea like why my brother wouldn't rescue me and cut it off after a few seconds, say, well, as Aneesh is saying, and boom, he could finish my sentences, I could finish his. Well, he just stares at me in the video for a good minute and a half until I finally compose myself, stabilize, and then carry on for 45 minutes into a really productive, just the facts, ma'am thing. Right. So the first couple minutes were like weird and people are like, hey, is Aneesh okay? Everything fine? When we wrap up, I was embarrassed and I apologized to you. They're like, oh, Aneesh, don't worry about it. Whatever, it's
10
fine.
people saw
10
this
people,
thing.
it's fine. I get a call at 5:00 from a friend of mine who's in entertainment. He says, oh man, you better watch The Daily Show tonight. I'm like, what? Of all the people in the world who's watching this thing, the John Stewart team? And so that's what it does. He says, today at the White House, it was hilarious. And he just endless loop of me laughing. And it was all embarrassing. Like this guy didn't know what he was doing. It's like, Keystone Cops at the White House. But he ends with, what's so funny, Indian George Clooney? And so you're like, okay, that's pretty cool. Yeah. I thought I was in the senior staff.
Did your wife dig that though? I mean, that's kind of...
They were all mortified. My family's mortified that I fumbled my national debut and embarrassed the president, frankly. And so I was in a senior staff meeting. Every morning at 8:30, the senior staff, about 25 people gather in the Roosevelt Room and they debate the degree to which, issues of the day matter and make sure everyone's on the same page. So I walk in scared to death and they're going to say, how dare you embarrass this administration? You screwed this thing up. And I remember vividly, Rahm Emanuel, who's quite,
he's not
to the point. Yeah. He's not, anyway, he just sort of says, Indian George Clooney. And so I start laughing. Everyone's laughing and it was great. And so once that ice was broken, that I didn't embarrass the president, I didn't reflect poorly on the administration, it was great. And so now it's a tagline and it's hilarious. And obviously it's not true on the physical side, but I'll take it.
You're handsome.
My wife will take it. It's great.
It's pretty fun. That had to be quite something that you'll sort of never forget, right? Yeah. Did it make you appreciate the office of the president more than you because you now have an inside look and not few people get to see that level of detail and sort of scrutiny and structure and all that stuff.
So imagine the hardest decision you've had to make this year. Now imagine a 30-minute meeting where it's presented to you and you have to render judgment, not once, but 8 times in a given day, every day. What you don't appreciate is that the president doesn't have a lot of free time to just, shoot the breeze, what's going on, how are things. When an item is presented to the president, it's because the advisors around the president could not reach consensus, that it was so hard to reconcile competing priorities and values. So I appreciated the brilliance of President Obama because he prepared for every one of these very difficult decisions by reading the material we presented in advance. When we showed up, he knew exactly how to bring out the tough questions. He posed exactly the issues, surfaced them in a manner that would render the best decision-making. And he had to become an expert on every subject every half hour. That's unbelievably hard. Yeah. And a gift that we had in President Obama. And I would imagine all presidents having to grapple in this same way. Right. But in our administration, I can tell you whenever, and it was rare, whenever there were issues I worked on that required, usually tech is not controversial, so we just sail through. The idea is you don't have to waste his time. It's fine, get it. But when there was a debate, he knew exactly where I was most anxious about the argument, because even I was having a hard time to make the case. You knew exactly where that weakness was, and he went right after it to try to drill it out and help bring people together. So to me, there's something awe-inspiring about a person that could take on that role and the kind of brain power that it requires to do it well.
Yeah.
And we were blessed, I think, in the Obama administration to have such a hero in that role.
It does remind me a little bit, I mean, not to that degree, like these are not life and death decisions, but a little bit of being the co-founder or CEO, it's sort of the CEO.
Presumably.
It's not to the same degree, but like the
you have to make 100 choices.
100 decisions every day sort of thing. And everyone, like.
They're consequential.
Right. So I'm sure in some ways that sort of must, whether you sort of internalize it or not, I'm sure that ability to kind of like quickly
render judgment,
make decisions, and you sort of make them all the time with the absence of perfect information.
That's right. That's right.
9 times
it's the skill set of a great CEO.
Yeah.
Is the capacity to absorb limited information and render the best judgment you can, given the, you go to war with the army you have. This is the Rumsfeld quote, right? So you make the decisions with the information you have.
Right.
So
it's our mutual friend Scott Case always says about startups, which I love this, is he says the best analogy is like being a high school football coach.
Yes.
Because you can't like recruit other players. You basically have to put in the offense that you have. And you're gonna have like the short kid and you're gonna have, no quarterback who can't throw. So you're freaking option running, the option offense at that point.
You got it.
Which I think is kind of a fun truth. You just you got what you got. You got what you got. So I do want to talk a little bit about your this interplay that's I think fascinating about the book you wrote and the startup you now run and how they kind of fit together. Because I think we talk a lot about the power of a book in terms of focusing the mind on what matters and what you learn and think. And in some ways, you kind of wrote your own plan for the startup space. So talk a little bit about the book and how it's kind of changed the way you think a little bit.
Well, first a little bit of rewind, which is when I was in Virginia before I went to the White House, Governor Kane was a Democrat with a very Republican legislature. Governor Kane is a Democrat, I should say. And in the tech space, we probably worked together on about 20 plus bills that he ultimately signed into law.
Wow, that's a lot.
Well, the point in that, well, thank you for the line, that it was a productive time. The point was a Republican had to sponsor the bill for the most part. We had, out of the 20 plus bills, one was a democratically sponsored bill. Just because when you're in the minority, it's hard to get your ideas through.
Right.
So we had to come up with a way to work together across the aisle. And what struck me then, more so at the White House, was that for a lot of these issues, the normal left-right divide didn't quite apply. And so it was hard to explain, like, is what I'm doing like a talking point for a Democratic case to why we should be electing Democrats? Maybe. But a Republican could say the same things and they'd be doing the same work. So...
And it was across the board.
Yeah.
Data, innovation, technology, education, tech policy.
So you could say we may violently disagree about the future of healthcare in the context of who pays for the uninsured, but you can agree that we should modernize the system so we reduce waste.
Technology is a great equalizer in solving things.
It has the potential to. Right. So the question is, right? How?
Yeah.
So there's work. It's not like it magically happens. You got to work and you get it right. So when I was thinking about the next chapter of my life, I'd been somewhat anxious that a lot of the things we'd worked on that are tech related are really state issues. And we at the federal level kind of enabled it. So you want to change your energy policy. Well, who regulates the utilities? It's the state.
Right.
You want to really get into healthcare. Who regulates the doctors, hospitals, the insurance programs? It's the state. And ditto for schools. So you look at the big three issues of our generation and it's like, wow, this thing is clearly going to be done at the state level. So I thought, okay, how can I find a way to support states in a manner where we don't fight all the time, but we actually come together?
Right.
So I said, okay, if I could run for lieutenant governor of Virginia and had the opportunity to bring these ideas forward, while there might have been a partisan battle at the governor level, we might reach coalitions on a whole range of issues that may take a decade to come to fruition. And so I thought about it, said, how can I make the case that there's this non-ideological, forward-looking coalition to be made? And so I wrote this book trying to outline the vision, contextualize it based on the US history, and to look specifically around the tools and techniques available so that the government can get its act together in collaboration with this vibrant, dynamic, entrepreneurial private sector.
And you have this piece in that. I mean, you saying it that I think is interesting too, is you almost, to your point earlier about it's not a left and right, you have this moment in the very first chapter where you say, you're writing this for bureaucrats who sort of don't lose hope almost. I think
that's right.
It's really interesting. I hadn't sort of processed it until you said it, but it is. These issues are not partisan. These are issues of like, and technology can and innovation could be the great hope.
Correct.
I now see why you wrote it. But it's a powerful statement that these are just issues for our future, not.
We could have a debate about who subsidizes the cost of healthcare. Right. But if we take the cost of healthcare down 30%, it makes that debate easier to swallow.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Okay, so there you go. And so punchline is, I wanted to capture an argument that you can't really make in a 30-second campaign ad or in a few minutes stump speech.
Right.
And so that took time. And the benefit of that process is that it helped me crystallize. I could sit in any chair at a table where I could be at the center of the table as the elected official. I could be a staff person or a bureaucrat to the side that looks at where I fit to solve this. We've asked the incumbent industries, the utility companies, the hospitals, the doctors' offices, and I could see myself as the entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And if everyone's at the table really trying to optimize all these tools, I think we can make a big difference. So that was the kind of theory. I had written it assuming I'd be sitting at one seat in the table.
Right.
When I lost my campaign, I moved seats. But and the blessing there is that I had a campaign supporter who's another dear friend of mine, who's my partner, Sanju Bansal, who co-founded a company called MicroStrategy and had been a wildly successful entrepreneur. And he said, look, everything you're describing we can do from the private sector. Change the seat. I'll support the effort. I'll recruit your co-founder. Let's put a team together. And now we've got 20 plus people sitting next door. Humans out here cranking away. We help healthcare delivery systems that are looking to take on the responsibility of lowering the costs and boosting quality, these accountable care organizations. And we see them as our number one customer. And we support 48 of them in the country today, a little over a million Medicare patients that we service. And that's a humbling and exciting role to play.
It's awesome to watch. I mean, because I've gotten the seat from, I remember when you were first talking about the book and then you sort of were talking about the journey of the patient. And I was like, I believed you, but I didn't quite understand it. And then to sort of be seeing, it's like, you were right. Like, I mean, there's obviously changes, but like this sort of idea, you talked about this as a journey and you didn't call it a journey.
No, I didn't. Right?
But you did. You always talked about it as a journey. And sort of it's interesting to see how that has evolved. And it's kind of cool to create it in that level of...
It changes the dynamic when you look at a person. So the technical underpinning of this is there was an MIT team in the 90s that wrote a paper called The Guardian Angel. And they wrote it as an unsolicited proposal to DARPA. And they said, imagine a person that had a digital guardian angel that could consume all the data feeds that are available to that person. And you could use that in the healthcare context and beyond. So now imagine it could process all of that information and whisper in your ear decisions you should make. You should see this doctor, not this doctor. You should pursue that line of therapy, not this line of therapy. And that is now starting to come to life in healthcare where I'm being guided through my journey, not, hey, I'm calling a doctor because I got back pain and that's going to go me down one road. And then I've got this underlying diabetic condition that's going to put me down a different road. And they're related and they're not being treated the same way. Yeah.
It's fascinating you say it too, because I think the technology is enabling this new way to coach humans on a personalized way. I mean, I even see it with what I'm doing, right? I'm coaching these people from using technology to coach them towards educational outcomes. I think we're going to see this big wave happening of exactly that. The Guardian Angel is an interesting thing, but it's exactly what humans are best when they're coached. That's why in sports it works so well. And why can't we apply this to other places? Which is,
so we're going to do it. We're going to see if we can bend the cost curve, improve outcomes, and sort of see what we can do. Health, education. You can think of it like my child will take 1,000 standardized questions before she graduates high school. That's the Virginia Standards of Learning. And maybe it drops a little bit where this is all a debate.
She got her smarts from her mom, so she'll do well, right?
Mom's definitely giving her the smarts. Now, she'll have a different profile of what skills she's mastered and which ones she's struggling with. Imagine if every day she could subscribe to the Khan Academy, where it knew exactly where her gaps were.
Right.
and it preloaded the films or the videos that would be meant for her to close the gap. That doesn't exist today because you have to separately log in the con, take their exam, start from scratch, and they're two different frameworks. So if I had one framework and I could connect people to my longitudinal repository of information, then maybe I could get better support. That's the theory.
I love it. Do you think that there are things that you observed from now kind of working with governments that you think you now would have gone back and advised yourself a few years back to say the change that sort of be, especially in the healthcare side?
Yeah, because what I take for granted is we presume when we walk in the door that government does a bunch of things and it's just doing what it does. And we're mostly focusing on what new things to do or changes to make. We don't really appreciate the thing we've been doing for 20 years has been woefully ineffective. And we don't get that signal as often as we could. So
it's like a low-grade migraine that you just have all the time. You don't think about it, but you really
because what occupies the time is what's the new thing? What's the new procedure, new approach, new policy? So I think the new policy creation role in the White House is well-staffed, might even be overstaffed. But what are the things that we're already doing that we could do better, more efficiently? That's done less in a structured. We're not cleaning up the underbrush. We're mostly adding to the top line, if you will, new initiatives, new roles, new services. And I think in hindsight, I'd probably say we should balance that equation a bit more with like cleaning up the underbelly.
Do you think that some of the stuff you guys did with USDS and 18F kind of was like help? Because that to me, I think if you look back on the Obama administration,
the legacy,
20 years from now, we may find that to be one of the biggest things that happened.
Well, and that happened after my tenure. So,
but you were sort of part of that whole thing of embracing it. So, take a little
appreciate
credit.
that. In my tenure, we ran a bunch of experiments. Everything was an experiment. We'd heard loud and clear from device manufacturers that the FDA is stifling innovation and it's cramping our style. And it was an extremely loud voice. And there were so many stories. Dean Kamen, who became a friend, Dean was like, I've built this artificial limb that I can give to veterans and I can't get FDA approval because it's no different than a walking cane or whatever the analogy was. He was angry. But here's the point. The secretary of HHS, then the commissioner of the FDA, and then the head of the device division of the FDA, when you break it all down, they saw this problem. And while I was there to provide air cover, ultimately they needed a team of entrepreneurs and innovators to join hands with the entrepreneurs and innovators inside government. It's the marriage of the two that was magical. So I think the experience we learned we called it Entrepreneurs in Residence program, really said, okay, any layer of government can have a team of people define a problem and bring in experts from the outside and inside to work together on the issue and make a difference. So now, after healthcare.gov's fiasco, we just put a bunch of flood the zone, resources. So we have like 200 people in U.S. Digital Service. We had a team of 4, you got scaled now and hundreds more in 18F. So now there's capacity. So even if it doesn't make the president's desk, let's do this initiative. Everyday parts of government can be materially better on account of this new formula.
Love it.
All right,
this
sir.
This is fun, man.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course, man.
My pleasure.
This is awesome. Thanks for doing this.
All right.
Yeah, it's fun. I think these are fun to do. So I'm glad. I appreciate you for hanging out with me.
Thank you.